My beloved child, pause for a moment. Not everything that moves in your life makes noise. There is something quieter than words, softer than a whisper, yet somehow stronger than anything you can explain. And lately, you've been brushing against it without even realizing. That subtle feeling, that unspoken awareness, like something is shifting just beneath the surface of your everyday moments. You didn't imagine it. There is a change unfolding, not loudly, not dramatically, but gently, almost like it's learning how to exist between you and someone else without being noticed too soon. And the strange part is, it didn't begin today. Look back, just slightly. Not too far, just enough to notice those small, almost forgettable moments. The way their presence started to feel different. The way certain conversations lingered a little longer in your mind. The way silence between you stopped feeling empty, and began to feel meaningful. Why would silence suddenly feel full? That question alone holds more truth than it seems. Because when something real begins to form, it doesn't rush to announce itself. It doesn't try to prove anything. It simply starts existing, quietly, patiently, waiting for you to notice. And you are starting to notice, aren't you? Not in a loud, obvious way, but in fragments, in glimpses, in moments where your thoughts pause, and something inside you says, wait, something is different. But what exactly is changing? It's not just them, and it's not just you. It's the space between you. That invisible connection, the one that no one else can see, the one that doesn't need validation or explanation. It has started to shift. And shifts like this, they don't happen randomly. They happen when two energies, two journeys, two paths, begin aligning in a way they didn't before. But here's the part most people miss. Alignment doesn't always feel like excitement at first. Sometimes, it feels like confusion. Sometimes, it feels like distance, even when nothing is wrong. Sometimes, it feels like you're being pulled in two directions at once, like something is asking you to stay, and something else is asking you to pause. Have you felt that? That strange push and pull, where you can't fully explain why things feel different, but you can't ignore it either. Don't rush past this moment. Stay here, just a little longer. Because this is where most people lose awareness. They try to define something that hasn't fully revealed itself yet. But you're not here to rush. You're here to understand. And understanding begins when you stop trying to control what is unfolding. Notice this. They may not have said anything directly. They may not have changed in an obvious way. But something in their energy, in their presence, has shifted. It's in the way they respond, or sometimes, the way they don't. It's in the timing, the pauses, the unspoken things that somehow say more than words ever could. And somehow, you feel it, even if you can't explain how. But why now? Why is this happening at this moment in your life? That's where it gets deeper. Because this shift isn't just about connection. It's about awareness. Your awareness. There was a time, not too long ago, when you wouldn't have noticed this at all. It would have passed quietly, unnoticed, like so many other moments before it. But now, you're aware. Now, you feel the difference. Now, you sense when something is real, and when something is just surface. That didn't happen by accident. You've grown. Not in a loud, obvious way that others can easily point out. But internally, emotionally, energetically. And because of that, you can now feel things you couldn't feel before. Which means, this shift didn't just begin between you and them. It began within you. Think about that for a second. What if the reason you're noticing this change is because you've changed first? What if something inside you has become more aligned, more aware, more open, and now, you're able to perceive what was always quietly trying to form? That changes everything, doesn't it? Because now, this isn't just about wondering what they feel. It's about recognizing what you feel, without needing confirmation. And that's where the real transformation begins. But don't misunderstand this moment. This isn't about jumping to conclusions. This isn't about labeling what this is. Because the moment you try to force a definition, you risk interrupting something that is still unfolding. Let it breathe. Let it exist, without pressure. Let it become what it is meant to become, without rushing ahead of it. Because what is real doesn't disappear when given time. It becomes clearer. And right now, clarity is forming. Slowly, quietly, but steadily. You might notice it in the smallest ways. A shift in how they look at you, even if it's just for a second longer than before. A change in how conversations feel, even when nothing important is being said. A sense of familiarity, as if something between you is becoming more natural, more effortless. And yet, there's still uncertainty. There's still that question lingering in the back of your mind. What does this mean? That question is natural, but don't rush to answer it yet, because sometimes, the meaning reveals itself not through answers, but through moments. Moments that seem ordinary, but carry something deeper underneath. Moments that make you pause, even if you don't know why. Moments that stay with you, long after they've passed. And you've had those moments, haven't you? Small, almost insignificant on the surface, but somehow, unforgettable. That's not coincidence. That's connection, slowly becoming visible. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Not all shifts feel comfortable at first. Sometimes, when something real begins to form, it challenges your expectations. It makes you question things you thought you understood. It brings emotions to the surface that you didn't realize were there. And suddenly, you're not just observing the shift. You're experiencing it. And that can feel overwhelming. Not in a negative way, but in a way that makes you pause and think. Why does this feel different from anything before? That feeling. That quiet intensity. That unexplainable pull. It's not something to ignore, but it's also not something to rush into. It's something to observe, to understand, to feel, without pressure. Because this shift, it's not just about where things are going. It's about how they are evolving. And evolution takes time. It doesn't happen all at once. It unfolds, layer by layer, moment by moment, until one day, you look back and realize something has completely changed, without ever needing to force it. And right now, you are standing at the beginning of that realization. You can feel it. Even if you don't fully understand it yet. And that's okay. You're not meant to have all the answers right now. You're meant to stay present, to stay aware, to stay open. Because something important is still forming. Something that hasn't fully revealed itself yet. Something that is quietly, steadily, becoming clearer with each passing moment. But there's one thing you need to be honest about. Are you truly allowing yourself to feel this shift? Or are you holding back, just slightly, without even realizing it? That question matters more than you think, because sometimes, the only thing standing between you and clarity is hesitation, not fear, not doubt. Just a subtle hesitation, a pause, a moment where you question whether to fully step into what you're feeling. And that hesitation, it's understandable, because when something feels real, it matters. And when something matters, you don't want to misread it. You don't want to move too fast, or assume something that isn't fully clear yet. But here's the quiet truth. You don't need to rush forward. But you also don't need to step back. There is a space in between. A space where you simply observe, feel, and allow. And that's exactly where you are right now. In that space, between what was and what is slowly becoming. And if you stay here, just a little longer, if you don't skip past this moment, you'll begin to notice something even deeper. Something that changes the way you see this connection entirely. But that part hasn't fully revealed itself yet. Something about this, it's starting to feel more familiar than it should. Not familiar in the sense of routine, but in a deeper, quieter way, like you've stepped into a moment that somehow already knows you. And that feeling, it doesn't come from imagination. It comes from recognition. But recognition of what? That's where everything slows down. Because when something begins to feel familiar without explanation, it usually means you're not just seeing it for the first time, you're finally understanding it for what it is. Think about the way your attention has shifted. You're noticing things now that you didn't before. The tone in their voice, the timing of their words, the pauses that seem to carry more meaning than what's actually being said. Even the smallest interactions, they feel different now. Why would something so subtle begin to stand out so clearly? Because your awareness is no longer asleep. There was a time when you moved through moments like these without stopping, without questioning, without feeling the depth hidden inside them. But now, something inside you pauses. It listens. It observes. And that pause, that awareness, it's what's allowing this shift to become visible. But here's where it deepens. What if this connection hasn't suddenly changed? What if it has simply reached a point where it can no longer remain unnoticed? Let that sit with you. Because sometimes, the most powerful changes don't begin when something starts. They begin when something hidden becomes impossible to ignore. And right now, something between you and this person is crossing that threshold. You might notice it in the way your thoughts return to them, without effort. Not in an obsessive way, not in a forced way, but in a natural rhythm, like your mind is gently pulled back to something it finds meaningful. Why does your mind return there? Why does your attention linger, even when nothing significant seems to have happened? Because something is forming beneath the surface. Something that doesn't need constant interaction to exist. Something that grows, even in silence. And silence has become different between you, hasn't it? There was a time when silence meant distance, or absence, or uncertainty. But now, silence feels like presence. It feels like something is still there, even when nothing is being said. And that's not something that happens with just anyone. That's something that happens when a connection begins to move beyond words. But don't mistake this moment. Just because something feels deeper, doesn't mean it's meant to be rushed into clarity. In fact, the more real something is, the more it asks you to slow down, to observe, to feel, to allow it to reveal itself, naturally. And yet, there's a part of you that wants to understand it now, isn't there? A quiet curiosity, a question that keeps returning. What is this becoming? That question, it's not wrong, but it's also not meant to be answered all at once. Because if you look closely, the answer is already beginning to show itself. Not in words, but in patterns. Patterns that are subtle, but consistent. The way they appear in your life, not randomly, but almost at the exact moments when something inside you shifts. The way conversations seem to carry a different energy, even when they're simple. The way your emotions respond, sometimes stronger than expected, sometimes softer, but always noticeable. These patterns, they're not accidents. They're signals. Not loud signals, not obvious ones, but quiet confirmations that something is aligning in a way it didn't before. And alignment, it changes everything. Because once something begins to align, it doesn't go back to being what it was. It evolves. Slowly, steadily, but inevitably. And that's what you're feeling right now. Evolution. Not of the situation alone, but of the connection itself. And here's the part that might surprise you. This shift, it's not one-sided. Even if nothing has been spoken, even if no clear expression has been made. The energy of change, it doesn't exist in only one place. It moves, it reflects, it responds, which means what you're feeling is not just coming from you. Pause there. Let that realization settle, without rushing past it. Because if something inside you has started to notice, to feel, to become aware, then something on the other side has shifted too. Maybe not in the same way, maybe not at the same pace, but enough to create this space you're now standing in. This space where things feel different, but not yet defined. This space where something is growing, but not yet spoken. This space where clarity is forming, but not yet complete. And this space, it's delicate, not fragile, but sensitive. Because what happens here determines how this unfolds next. And that's why your awareness matters. That's why your presence matters. Because when you're aware, you don't force things. You don't rush ahead. You don't try to control what hasn't fully revealed itself yet. You allow it. You stay present with it. You let it unfold, in its own time. And that's exactly what this moment is asking of you. To stay, not physically, but internally. To stay with what you're feeling, without needing to escape into answers. To stay with the uncertainty, without trying to eliminate it too quickly. To stay with the shift, without interrupting its process. Because something important is happening here. Something that doesn't need urgency. It needs attention. And you're giving it that, even now, just by being here, just by feeling this. But let's go a little deeper. There's something else you might have noticed, something even more subtle. A change in how you respond. Not just to them, but within yourself. Moments where you would have reacted differently before, now feel calmer. Moments where you might have overthought, now feel clearer. Moments where you would have questioned your own feelings, now feel more certain, even without proof. Why is that happening? Because this shift, it's not just changing the connection. It's changing you, not in a dramatic way, but in a quiet, steady, undeniable way. And that's the kind of change that lasts, because it doesn't rely on external confirmation. It comes from within. And when something begins to change within you, it naturally begins to change what you experience outside of you. That's the deeper layer of this shift. It's not just about them. It's about what this connection is awakening inside you. Awareness, clarity, presence, and maybe, something even more meaningful. Recognition of what you truly feel, without needing to question it constantly. But don't rush past this realization. Stay with it, just a little longer. Because there's still something you haven't fully seen yet. Something that hasn't completely revealed itself. Something that will make all of this make sense in a way you didn't expect. And it's closer than you think. Closer than the thoughts you've been trying to form. Closer than the answers you've been searching for. It's already there. Quietly waiting for you to notice it. And once you do, The way you see this connection may never be the same again. And then, something almost imperceptible begins to surface, not outside of you, but within the quietest part of your awareness. It doesn't arrive like a clear answer, it doesn't announce itself with certainty, it simply appears as a feeling you can't ignore anymore. A realization, soft, but undeniable. You were never just reacting to them. You were responding to something that was already growing between you. Pause there, because that changes everything. For so long, it may have felt like you were trying to understand their energy, their behavior, their signals. But now, something shifts in your perspective. You begin to see that this isn't about decoding them. It's about recognizing what has been forming, without needing translation. And suddenly, the confusion you once felt starts to lose its weight. Not because everything is fully clear, but because something deeper has become steady inside you. That steady feeling, it's new, isn't it? Not overwhelming, not intense in a chaotic way, but grounded. Like something within you has stopped searching, and started understanding. But understanding what? That's where it becomes even more interesting. Because the answer isn't something you're told. It's something you feel. It's in the way your thoughts no longer chase every possibility. It's in the way your emotions begin to settle, not because they've disappeared, but because they've found direction. And direction brings calm, even when the situation itself hasn't fully unfolded. And this calm, it's not accidental. It's a sign that you're no longer standing outside this shift. You're part of it. And when you become part of something, instead of just observing it, everything begins to feel different. The waiting feels different. The silence feels different. Even the unknown starts to feel less like uncertainty, and more like anticipation. Have you noticed that? That subtle change, where you're no longer anxious about what's coming, but quietly curious. That curiosity, it's important, because it means you're no longer resisting what's unfolding. You're allowing it. And when you allow something to unfold, it reveals itself in ways you could never force. But let's go even deeper. Because there's still one layer you haven't fully seen. Something that has been present, quietly influencing everything, without drawing attention to itself. Timing. Not the kind of timing you measure with days or hours, but the kind of timing that aligns experiences, emotions, and awareness, all at once. Think about this. Why didn't this shift happen earlier? Why didn't you notice it before? Why now? Because now, you're ready to see it, not just with your thoughts, but with your awareness. There was a version of you, not too long ago, that wouldn't have understood this moment. That might have overlooked it, or misread it, or rushed past it entirely. But now, you're here, present, aware, able to feel the difference between something ordinary and something meaningful. And that ability, it changes the entire experience. Because now, you're not just experiencing this shift. You're understanding it as it happens. And that's rare. Most people only understand something after it has already unfolded. But you're beginning to see it in real time. That's why this feels so different. That's why this feels almost unreal, yet deeply real at the same time. But don't let that thought rush you. Stay with this moment. Because something else is happening. Something even more subtle. You're beginning to trust what you feel. Not blindly, not impulsively, but quietly, steadily, without needing constant validation. And that kind of trust, it transforms everything. Because when you trust what you feel, You stop searching for proof in every small detail. You stop questioning every moment. You stop doubting what your awareness is already showing you. And instead, you begin to observe, with clarity. You begin to feel, without resistance. You begin to allow, without fear. And in that space, everything becomes clearer. Not all at once, but enough. Enough to feel that this shift is real. Enough to know that something meaningful is unfolding. Enough to stay, without needing to rush ahead. But here's where it gently turns. Because just as you begin to settle into this understanding, you might notice something unexpected. A moment where things feel still again. A pause, where nothing seems to move forward. A silence that feels deeper than before. And for a second, you might wonder, did it stop? It didn't. This is part of it. Because not all progress looks like movement. Sometimes, progress looks like stillness. Sometimes, it looks like everything becoming quiet, so that something deeper can take shape. And this stillness, it's not empty. It's full. Full of alignment. Full of quiet shifts that aren't visible yet, but are happening nonetheless. And if you stay with it, without rushing to fill the silence, you'll begin to feel it again. That subtle pull. That quiet awareness. That sense that something is continuing, even when nothing is being said. And this time, it will feel different. Not uncertain, but steady. Not confusing, but unfolding. And that's when you'll realize something important. This shift was never something you needed to chase. It was something you needed to notice. And now, you have. But there's still one final piece. One quiet realization that hasn't fully surfaced yet. Something that will connect everything you've felt, everything you've noticed, everything you've begun to understand, into one clear awareness. And when that moment arrives, you won't question it. You won't overthink it. You'll simply know. Not because someone told you, but because something inside you became certain. And that moment, it's closer than it seems. Closer than your next thought. Closer than your next question. It's already beginning to form. Right here. In the quiet space. Where everything is finally starting to make sense. And just when everything begins to settle into a quiet understanding, something deeper rises, not as a question this time, but as a knowing that feels almost too simple to notice at first. You were never meant to figure this out all at once. That thought, it softens everything, doesn't it? Because somewhere along the way, you may have believed that clarity had to arrive suddenly, like a final answer, like a moment where everything becomes obvious all at once. But this is different. This is clarity unfolding in layers. Not loud, not overwhelming, but steady. And now, you're beginning to see the layer that was always there, quietly waiting beneath everything else. It was never just about whether they feel something. It was never just about what this connection might become. It was about what this connection reveals, about you. Pause here. Because this realization, it doesn't rush past you. It stays. It asks you to look inward, just slightly, not with pressure, but with honesty. What has this shift shown you about yourself? Not what you think you should feel, but what you actually feel, when everything becomes quiet. There's a truth there, isn't there? Something simple, but powerful. You care. Not in a heavy way, not in a way that pulls you out of yourself, but in a way that feels natural. Like something inside you recognized this connection, before your thoughts ever tried to explain it. And that recognition, it's not something to question, it's something to respect. Because real feelings, they don't demand attention. They don't force themselves into your awareness. They arrive gently, and then they stay. And what you're feeling, it has stayed. Through the questions, through the pauses, through the moments where nothing seemed clear. It didn't disappear. It just waited, for you to understand it. And now, you are. But there's something even more important hidden inside this realization. You're no longer trying to hold on to something uncertain. You're allowing something real to reveal itself, without resistance. That shift, inside you, it changes everything. Because when you stop trying to control what you feel becomes clearer, stronger, more grounded, and suddenly, the connection itself begins to feel different, not because it changed again, but because your perspective has. You're no longer looking for signs everywhere. You're no longer analyzing every small moment. You're simply present, and presence. It allows you to see things as they are, not as you fear they might be, or hope they could be. And in that presence, you begin to notice something quietly powerful. There is no rush. Not from you. Not from them. Not from whatever is unfolding between you. Everything is moving, exactly as it needs to. And that realization, it brings a kind of calm you didn't expect. Because now, you're not waiting anxiously for something to happen. You're witnessing something that is already happening. And that difference, it's everything. But stay here for a moment longer. Because there's still one final shift, one that completes this entire experience, in a way that feels almost effortless once you see it. It's this. You no longer need to ask what this means. Because you've begun to feel what it is. And feeling, it doesn't require explanation. It doesn't need constant validation. It simply exists, and becomes clearer over time. Which means, you don't need to chase clarity anymore. You don't need to search for answers outside of yourself. You don't need to force this connection into a definition, before it's ready. All you need to do is stay present with what is already unfolding, and trust. Not blindly, but quietly. Trust what you feel. Trust the awareness that brought you here. Trust the stillness, even when it feels like nothing is happening. Because something is happening. It always has been. And now, you can finally see it. Not all at once, but enough. Enough to know that this shift is real. Enough to understand that it didn't appear by accident. Enough to feel that whatever this is becoming, it's unfolding in its own time, with its own rhythm, without needing to be forced. And that's where everything softens. That's where everything becomes lighter. Because now, you're not holding on to uncertainty. You're standing inside understanding. And from this place, everything ahead feels different. Not because you suddenly know the outcome, but because you trust the process. And that trust, it changes how you experience every moment that comes next. So when you feel that quiet awareness again, when you notice those subtle shifts, those small, meaningful moments, don't question them, don't rush them, just notice, just feel, just allow. Because this connection, it's no longer something you're trying to understand. It's something you're beginning to experience, fully, clearly, and without resistance. And as you continue to stay present with it, as you continue to allow it to unfold, you'll begin to see something even more beautiful. Not just how this connection evolves, but how you evolve within it. And that is the part that was always waiting to reveal itself. Not loudly, not suddenly, but quietly. just like everything else that truly matters.